deforestation, pollution, climate change, extinction. Most of us know that we're facing an ecological crisis caused by humans, that this crisis is destabilizing the climate, it's causing human populations to be uprooted, and it's causing the extinction of thousands of species. In fact, the WWF Living Planet report estimates that in the past 4 decades, there's been a 60% crash in wildlife populations across the globe. India, too, is facing its own crisis. Every day, there are species being pushed to the brink. The stories I'm going to share then are of the unlikely defenders of wild India. But before I get to them, I'm going to start with my own story. As a child growing up in the city, I was obsessed with animals and obsessed with adventure. But in order to go on adventures and to see animals, I only had one choice, which was to read. And it was books that introduced me to the world's foremost wildlife conservationists. I traveled to Guyana with Gerald Durrell, to Rwanda with Diane Fossey, to Tanzania with Jane Goodall. And to me, it was always that wildlife conservation was the domain of one famous scientist. That bubble burst the year I graduated from school. As I began my own independent travels across India, I began to meet men and women, nameless, faceless, in towns and villages across the country who were fighting against all odds to save this wild planet. Around the same time, the founder of a magazine called Sanctuary Asia, Bittu Sehgal, started to introduce me to some unsung legends. He told me of Manglu Baiga, a Baiga tribal from Kana Tiger Reserve who spent his entire life tracking tigers and fighting poachers. Bholu Abrar Khan, the son of the chef of the Maharaja of Bharatpur, who learned about birds from the great Dr. Salim Ali, and who went on to be the backbone of dozens and dozens of surveys and studies on birds in Bharatpur. And then, of course, I heard of the late Qasim Wani, an incredible wise old forester from Kashmir, who spent his entire life protecting the exquisite Dachigam National Park. Years later, I joined Bittu to work at Sanctuary. And at this time, we began to ideate on ways in which we could help and empower unsung conservationists across India. We spoke about it and we realized that wildlife journalists, wildlife scientists, wildlife lawyers all had plenty of opportunities. But the grassroots conservationist, the conservationist who works for wildlife but who may not be educated, who may not speak English, who may not have access to the internet, was receiving no support. We ideated for a long time and we came up with the Mud on Boots project. The Mud on Boots project is an empowerment program for grassroots conservationists across India. It's a booster program that identifies and supports amazing, incredible individuals across this country. I'm going to give you a glimpse at some of these individuals, tell you about species you may never have heard of, take you to landscapes you might never see. Okay, let's go. So, in this very state, in the vast Thar Desert, we heard of Urus Khan. Urus is an illiterate goat herd, that's him on the left. And Urus is very interesting because when he is not tending to his goats or his camel or his cows, he is wandering this vast desert. For those of you who don't know, the great Indian bustard is a critically endangered bird that is on the very brink of extinction. Urus heard about this bird from a passing wildlife biologist. And when he heard of this bird, he decided that he was going to commit his time and his resources to its protection. So, come rain or shine, and usually it's just shine, Urus spends up to 6 hours a day patrolling the great Indian bustard's habitat. He reports on encroachments, on poaching, on any illegal activities happening within this habitat, and makes sure that the Forest Department is up to date with any ongoings in these closures. That's the great Indian bustard. Across the country from Urus, I heard of Manoj Gogoi. Manoj is an animal whisperer of sorts. He is extremely gifted, and he is a self-taught animal rehabilitator. Manoj lives on the outskirts of the Kaziranga National Park, and he has created over the years a community that is incredibly tolerant of wild species, where a few years ago, if a python entered a house or a bird was found injured on the ground, they would be killed. Now the villagers in this community know that they can pick up the phone and call Manoj, and he will come and rescue that animal. At the same time, he is working with the youth of his communities, training them to be naturalists so that they can find employment in the dozens of ecotourism resorts that are springing up around Kaziranga. And while he's doing all of this, Manoj is also proving to be a great support to the forest department. There are annual floods in Kaziranga, and when these strike, there is devastation, there are lives lost, there are animals that drown. And at this time, Manoj sets out and helps with the most risky rescues involving elephants, rhinos, and other large mammals. Before I heard of Sajal Madhu in Chhattisgarh, I had no idea of the crisis unfolding there. When Sajal Madhu was nominated to the Mud on Boots project, and I began to read the documents he started to send me, I realized that there's a human-elephant conflict crisis of incredible proportions playing out in this state. This is a state whose forests have been ravaged by coal mines. This is a state where communities are dirt poor, and this is a state where they are caught in incredible conflict. Elephants with no resources, no forests to wander, no water to drink, no food to eat, are forced to enter into farmlands where they eat crops, where they destroy homes, and if anyone gets in their way, they trample them. In retaliation, elephants such as this one are killed. They're electrocuted, they're poisoned. A lone warrior, Sajal, has taken up this cause, and he works as a bridge between the forest department and the communities that are suffering from conflict. What does he do? He goes from village to village in the Dharmjaigarh block of Chhattisgarh, and he talks to the communities. He works with villagers and helps them apply for the compensation that they are owed by the government. He works with the forest department to keep a track on elephant deaths as well as human deaths. He lobbies for the voluntary relocation of villages from the most vulnerable areas. And he continues to run awareness workshops week after week to help reduce this conflict. Where the state of India is failing the people of Chhattisgarh by not taking cognizance of this devastating issue, Sajal is a hero. Amongst this incredible diversity that we are blessed with in this country is a species called the fishing cat. The fishing cat is a small cat, and as its name suggests, it likes to fish. It is also the state animal of West Bengal. The problem with the fishing cat is that it often comes into conflict with fishing communities. The fishing communities feel that the fishing cat is taking their share of fish, and once in a while it will predate on goats in the region. Over here, we heard about a senior citizen named Joydev Pradhan. Joydev was also introduced to the fishing cat and its conservation merits by a passing wildlife biologist. And he was then nominated to our project as an advocate for this fishing cat within his community. Joydev is an innovator. He doesn't speak English or Hindi, so I communicate with him via a translator. And what Joydev did was very interesting. With the grant provided to him by the Mud on Boots project, Joydev bought a few pregnant goats. He then distributed these pregnant goats to economically challenged households in the village who had previously lost goats to the fishing cat. Just on the one simple condition that when the goats give kids, one kid will be returned to Joydev, and that kid can then go to any other family that has lost a goat to fishing cat predation. It sounds a little complicated, but effectively what Joydev did was create a bank of goats, a self-replenishing bank of goats that now are available to the entire community in case of predation by the fishing cat. With this simple and innovative bank, Joydev has reduced retaliatory killings. He has made his entire community far more tolerant to a species that for many years was very maligned. That's one of the families that benefited from Joydev's Goat Bank program. Okay, let's go back to the Northeast. Far, far in the Northeast, far from here, in the forests of Roing in Arunachal Pradesh, there's a man named Anoko Mega. Anoko is a Mishmi tribal. Now, these forests in this area are stunning, and they're home to India's only ape species, the Hulok gibbon. The Hulok gibbon is an incredible animal. It spends its entire life up in the trees. Its call can be heard from miles away. It mates for life. But as deforestation has crept across the country and far into the Northeast, what has happened is that forests have been fragmented, and many of these gibbon families have found themselves isolated, islanded in a few trees stuck in the middle of vast farmlands. What Anoko is doing is identifying farm sites where gibbons are stuck, and he has now initiated a long-term program working with farming communities to grow a corridor of trees leading back into the nearby wildlife sanctuary. It's a very ambitious project. It might not be successful, but what Anoko has done is involve his community in wildlife conservation. Many of you would have noticed by now that all the people I've spoken about so far have been men. And this was of grave, grave concern to us at the Mud on Boots project. There were no women being nominated to our project, and this could mean one of two things: that either there are no women grassroots conservationists in India, or two, that there are women grassroots conservationists, they're just not being recognized, encouraged, and supported. With this in mind, we set out a call to our vast network of friends and professionals, asking them to tell us about women grassroots conservationists that they know. It was Gerry Martin, a snake expert, who answered our call. For years, Gerry has been working on snakebite management issues in India. He's been a snake rescuer, he's studying snake venom composition, and Gerry has become very fearful of this trend within the country, where young boys, unequipped, untrained, are handling snakes and claiming to be rescuers. It's a dangerous trend that has seen the loss of life of both humans and animals. Gerry reached out to say, and I quote, "I want to take the testosterone out of snake rescue and snake rescue work." And so he proposed finding and training young women from the village of Ratnapuri near his field station in Karnataka to take up this work. It took several weeks, and then Gerry was able to identify Marina and Sandhya. Over the past year, Marina and Sandhya have shattered glass ceilings. They are doing incredible work. They have learned to handle snakes. They've overcome their own fears. They are running workshops for children within their community and their village. And in short, they have become an inspiration for everyone. In the 2 years since we launched the Mud on Boots project, we have spread across the country. We support individuals across the country. I'm very cognizant of the fact that we are simply a stepping stone for these individuals who would be doing conservation work with or without us. But in recognizing them, in acknowledging them, and in uplifting them, we are able to contribute so much more to grassroots conservation in the country. I'm going to end with a man named Alemba Yimchungur. For all the work that these grassroots conservationists do, there is very little recognition. So, in order to acknowledge the contribution of veteran grassroots conservationists, those who have been working in the field for decades, we established a small cash award. And when we announced this, we came to know of Alemba. Alemba is a hunter-turned-conservationist. He is a Naga tribal who 30 years ago gave up his weapons in order to protect the forests of the Fakem Wildlife Sanctuary. At that time, the sanctuary had not even been declared, and Alemba was the one who set the markers for the sanctuary. For 30 years, he has led expeditions. He has led scientists into the forest who have discovered new species. He has tracked animals. He has fought poachers. He has cracked down on the logging mafia. And till date, Alemba earns a measly 4,000 rupees a month. Why is grassroots wildlife conservation so important? Wildlife conservation is the building block of this economy, of this country. The food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, all of this depends on healthy natural infrastructures. And so therefore it falls on each one of us to be able to support wildlife conservation efforts. What can you do? That's a question I get asked very often. Number one, change your heroes. There are people out there in this country who are working unacknowledged and unsung, and who can do with your support. And then learn about wildlife. We cannot protect that which we do not love, and we cannot love that which we do not know. So to conclude, all I would like to say is that it is now up to you and I to acknowledge the ecological crisis at hand and to support Mud on the Boots conservationists across the country. Thank you.